Your hands. If you've done it in the last 6 months, put up your hands if you've done it. Okay? Why do you do that?
Convenience.
Like, you don't have to work anymore. Just shoot me outside and take my money. That's convenient too, but you're not going to do that, right? What do you mean by convenience? What does that mean?
If you go down, someone will horn at you.
They will horn at you?
Yeah.
No, they won't.
They will.
How many of you go faster than 50 past that sign again? Put up your hands, please. Okay. How fast do you go? You're looking very guilty. How fast do you go?
I don't know. It's 70 before that, so I'm probably going just under 70 or something.
Are you really probably going under 70 in the 70?
Well, probably not.
Okay. Because apparently these are meaningless concepts, this idea of speed limit, right? So, why? Why is it 50 on the bridge? If it's 70 here, why is it 50 on the bridge?
Gets icy in the winter.
It gets icy in the winter? Does it? It's not above the river. It should probably melt because it's got all those hot engines going underneath it. I don't think it really gets that icy, does it? All right. Now this is the part that doesn't exist anymore. Do you remember when Pacific Avenue buttressed the First Street Bridge? And there was a stop sign here. How many of you stopped at the stop sign? Anybody? I would stop at that stop sign. And what's the problem when you want to make the death-defying left turn off of Pacific? Now you can't do this anymore because they've shut it down. They probably shut it down because you people just wouldn't slow down. But what was it like? How many of you ever had to do this? Where you had to make a left turn off of Pacific. But the problem was, as you're watching, to make sure no traffic is coming, these missiles are flying over faster than you could possibly imagine. People in these metal missiles, vroom, over that bridge, vroom, over that bridge, and you get to the point where you cannot properly assess the safety. So then what you do is you go, Jesus, take the wheel, and you drive around the corner, right? And you hope in hell that maybe you're going to go between these two people because there's no frickin' way you can anticipate how fast those people are coming over, right? There's no way. They come over that bridge so fast. And by the way, how do you tell if the cops used to wait right here, remember that? They used to wait right here. Here's a little tidbit of information. When you're shooting over that bridge and you start to see everyone's brake lights coming on at the crest, the cops are there. Okay? That's how you can tell, right? The police are there. So, when you're shooting over that bridge and going whatever is convenient for you, what type of turmoil are you causing? And what would it be like for this person if everyone was nice and leisurely over that bridge at 50 kilometers an hour? What would life be like for that person? Safer? Better? So what happens when people break the rules to society? What happens? And by the way, folks, this is not a moral lesson. I don't care whether you break the rules or not. That's not for me to determine. But I need you to understand what's going on and what's the impact of it. What's it like for people, other people, when the rules are being broken? And why? Why is it like that? Why is it unsafe for this person when those people don't follow the rules? This is kind of the key. Can you try and answer it?
You're making their life harder, more stressful,
How come?
because you're making it more difficult for them to do what they're trying to do legally.
Why is it a problem that they're not following the law to that person? This is a tricky little thing, but when we get the pieces together, you should see it.
Sort of like,
Why though?
it's sort of like a blind intersection because the bridge arcs and then comes down a bit so you can't see who's coming. So if they're going 70 and you're expecting to go 50, they can't tell. They can't tell if you're going to come shoot across. So you may turn and think you have time, but then they could be going like 70 or 80 and just smash into you.
I'm going to take that. It's close enough. Go ahead.
Basically, if everybody drove the speed limit, then you would understand what the speed is a vehicle's traveling at, and you'd understand the actual ratio of the time you would have to make the turn based off the speed someone's going at.
Yeah, that is also reasonably close to the point that I want you to get. The point I want you to get is this. Laws create predictability. And we need predictability for stability. Right? I need to know what you're going to do. I need to know that when you're driving on the right side of me, I don't have to watch you because you're not looking at your phone. You're looking at the road. I need that for predictability. I need to be able to predict what you're going to do. And the law creates that order. You know what's going to happen because there's a rule. But it only creates the order to the extent that people follow the rules. Right? If everyone breaks the rules, or if there are no rules, you have no idea what anyone's going to do. And that is called chaos. Right? That's a chaotic environment in which you don't know what's going to happen or how to respond to it. So, I'm not here to tell you to don't text and drive, although I would. Don't text and drive, folks. It's a bad, bad thing to do. I'm certainly not here to tell you never to speed. But you need to understand that every time people, not you, people break rules, it destabilizes an ordered society. Because when we don't know whether people are going to follow the rules, we can't predict what's going to happen. Can you imagine if people were to drive on whatever side of the road they wanted, like they drive whatever speed limit they wanted? So you come along and they say, I think I'm going to switch over to that lane. You know, that would be pretty bad, right? For both of them. But laws do have a purpose. And the purpose is basically stability. And if you don't want to live in a society that is chaotic, where you don't know what's going to happen and you can't respond to it, you need society to follow rules. And that's why we punish people for breaking the rules, is because you're destabilizing society. Right? You're creating a situation in which people don't know what's going to happen. Does that make sense to you? The purpose? No, neat. So what are laws? One word.
Rules.
They are rules. They're not any old rules. They're rules that are enforced through our legal system. But if you had to use one word, they're rules. And what I want to move on to now is where do the rules come from? Who? I thought you said God. Oh, I was going to... Where do the rules come from? Hold your answer. They're yours. What's the rest of you say?
Committees?
Which committees? Can I make a rule? A law. I'm talking about a law, not any old rule. I'm talking about laws. So when I ask that question, This is also something you need to understand. I will often get this answer, and it's not a wrong answer. But it's the part that you all probably have a basic understanding about. What people don't understand is the other place that they come from. Even though you might have heard the words or things, you don't understand it. So this is one source of law. This is one place that law comes from. And you're aware of the fact that the government makes these things called statutes, which have the rules in them. But that's not the only source of law. There's another source that is at least as important, but it's different. And in order to understand the second, this is the one that people don't normally understand very well, I have to give you a history lesson. Because it's through understanding the history, you will understand this other place that the rules come from. So, are there any English history scholars out there? Okay, I'm going to ask the same question a different way. How many of you know the significance of the date in English history of 1066? How many of you don't know? Put up your hands if you don't know. Okay, that's good. I can make up anything. You're never going to know that I'm filming about crap, right? Because this is not a history course. And I may not have the details right. And every now and again, I get some English history genius goes, that's not right, Mary. You're not right. That's the thing. But I've learned enough that I can probably get the basics well enough so that you get the point. In 1066, there was a battle. And the battle was for the entire country of England. Does anybody know who fought in that battle? No looking it up. How many of you know? Okay. It was a guy by the name of William the Conqueror. Do you know why he was called William the Conqueror? He won that one. Otherwise, he'd be William the big fat loser, right? But he's not. He was William the Conqueror because in the Battle of Hastings in 1066, he won. Here's an interesting question. How long was the war that it took for William to win the entire country? How long did it last for? Weeks? All right. Any other guesses? This is just guess. Years? Any other guesses? Months? Anything left? It was, in fact, one day. Went out in the morning, sometime during the day, he looks around and goes, well, just us left. Right? Because that's the way it was back then, is that he was a guy and he was a thing. And because he won the battle, he got to rule all of England. He became king. There's some historical things that are fairly interesting. Has any of you ever been to London? Anybody been to London, England? Okay. Did you go on any tours while you were there? Did you go to the Tower of London?
Yes.
Did you? Did you? You did? Did you see the White Tower? It's the White Tower. Do you remember it? Big tower, kind of white. You remember the White Tower?
Kind of.
Okay, kind of. That was the tower that William the Conqueror built in 1066. He was also the originator of the Tower of London stuff. Things. His was the original one that was put up there, and it's the White Tower. That's William the Conqueror, 1066. There are a bunch of other structures. Anybody know what's the Tower of London famous for? What's there besides the White Tower? What do people go there to see?
Jewels.
The crown jewels are there. Right? The big diamonds, everything. You get go on a conveyor belt and go past these things. Watch them. But anyways, they weren't there when William was there. Okay? So, 1066, a long time ago. And I was thinking the other day that what would William the Conqueror look like? What do you think he would look like? He was the king of this battle that they fought with swords. And the winner got the entire country. Well, my answer is not like Prince Harry, right? He would look like the little Prince Harry, right? He would be some big guy with big muscles and stuff, and a warrior in a battle. He'd have to be to have been able to live through this battle and thing. So, yeah, the kings are going to be different these days than they were back then. So I want you to imagine that you're William the Conqueror, right? And you've just finished winning the Battle of Hastings. At some point in that day, you realize that everyone else was dead or has run away. And you're cleaning off your bloody sword and putting up your leather boots. And you realize you're now the king. On this day, we're talking the day he won. We know that he's the king because he won, because that's the deal. Everyone knows that. What laws exist in England on that day?
0.
That's a very good answer. There will be none. Why will there be none? Because he just got the job and no one's made any yet, right? There are no rules. Will that be a problem for him?
Eventually.
And perhaps not very long. Because can you rule chaos? No, you can't rule chaos. It doesn't work. You cannot try to control an uncontrollable mass of people. And William the Conqueror was obviously fairly clever, because one of the things he realized is, I can't rule chaos. And if I'm going to keep this thing that I've just barely gotten, that I fought so hard and risked my life to get, I got to do stuff right away. So he did. And one of the very first things he did was that's England, by the way. It's not an elf hat. Okay, and that's my. There will always be in England like this. Okay, so this is things, and this is London, right? That's where he is. So what he did is he created courts. One of the very first things he did was sent out and set up courts. Why do we need courts? What are courts for?
Being the voice of reason amidst the chaos.
We need more than the voice of reason, though. How do they impact on chaos? What happens if there's no place for people to settle their disputes?
The old-fashioned way.
Behind the barn, right? This is the Wild West. Well, it was before the Wild. This is might is right. This is I win because I'm bigger than you, right? Whoever's the most powerful or the fastest gun or the biggest sword or whatever simply wins. And that's chaos. He can't rule chaos. So one of the things he recognizes, if I don't want chaos, I have to give people a place to settle their disputes. But that's not good enough. Let me show you why. I'm going to pick up here. Okay, I want you to imagine that you're traveling up highway number 10 and you're speeding. How fast are you going, by the way? How fast were you going, young lady?
120.
120, yes, of course. It was just 120. All right, so it was 120. So I give her a fine of $500. Are you happy about paying $500?
No.
Are you going to pay it?
Yeah.
Why?
So, like, lose my license or anything, or
And were you wrong?
for driving fast?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know that, right? So she's not happy with it, but she pays it because she knows she's wrong. All right? And then the next day, you get caught doing the exact same thing. Exactly the same spot, in fact. Okay? And you're exactly the same speed, 20 kilometers over the speed limit. And we're going to give you a fine of $5,000. How do you feel?
That's too much.
Why? Why is it too much? Speeding's very bad. Why is it too much, folks?
Because there's a precedent set already.
What's the precedent?
500.
But he doesn't get that. That's what she got. Right?
It's not fair.
What?
Then it's not fair.
It's not fair. Do you think that he might be, if he knows about this, fairly outraged?
Yeah.
In fact, he might be so mad because we have a funny sense of fairness, right? That we may take steps to try and make it fair. We may refuse to pay. We may go on a hunger. This is just not fair, right? And we have a problem. And how does he feel about the legal system, knowing that sometimes people get 500 and then he gets 5,000? What do you think about that legal system? Say it again. It's
Not fair.
and if the system isn't fair, do you buy into it?
No.
No. May as well go settle disputes behind the barn, right? So William the Conqueror recognized that not only did he have to create a legal system, he also had to make sure people felt that it was fair. And he knew that one of the quickest ways to get to it's not fair is to have different results. So when he sent out these judges, he gave them one basic rule. You should write this down. It's kind of important. You don't have to write down the history. I will never, ever give you a question about history. I will never ask you the significance of the date 1066. I will never ask you what was the name of that king. Okay? Because it's an open book exam. You don't look stuff up. You understand. Okay? But you do need to understand this. Same facts. Same outcome. Why would he do that? What's the purpose that we're trying to achieve by this? What? Same facts, same outcome? What's the result? Thank you. Because we need that. So, we have the king. He's created these courts. They're called King's Court. And later on, they became known as King's Bench because the judge sits at a bench. But we don't have a king right now. We have a, and therefore in Manitoba we have a court that's called Queen's Bench. Why? Because of William the Conqueror. It goes all the way back to 1066 and the King's Court. It has changed in name somewhat, but that's basically where this all comes from. And I'm going to show you, not tonight, maybe next week, how this all came in, but you just got to understand this basic idea. So, what happened here is that these courts got set up, and William the Conqueror, time passed, he died, another king comes in, they die, time passes, kings come in, the courts stay there. Okay? So, this gets into just sort of interesting history with respect to this. It's not particularly relevant for this course. Okay? I'm just going to tell you that honestly. So this is something you could listen to and find it perhaps a little interesting. So what happened in 1066? That was a long time ago. We've got to go back to what those judges were like. Could you describe what you would think would be a typical judge in 1066? What were they like, the guys that got appointed to be judges by William? What do you think? Describe them. What would you guess would be true about them?
Literate.
They would probably have some degree of education. right? One would expect that. What gender?
Male.
They will be male. Absolutely, for sure. Women were not considered to be people back then. They were property. 1066, property. Okay? So there would be men. They would probably be educated. Would they be religious?
Yeah.
Well, which religion?
Catholic,
I can never get my Catholic and Protestant when it comes to English history right, but we can say for sure that they would be Christian. Is that right? So there'd be Christian men, probably at least somewhat educated. And when we talk about religion, was religion a real thing back then? I mean, it is to a lot of people now, but back then, were these God-fearing people in 1066? Yeah. They were firm believers, right? No wishy-washy things. There was a right, and it was Christian. And so we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. So what happened in 1066, as this guy came in about 1200, 1250, I don't know the exact dates, a few hundred years later, we started to get much more of a class differentiation. So the history of England before this time was that there were different rulers, different things. I think France was in here for a little while. And the Romans, right? The Roman Empire had expanded at one point to include England. In around 900, they had expanded all the way up. The Romans were building bridges across the Seine River. They still find some of them now again, Roman bridges and stuff underneath. It's a huge thing. So history comes and goes and stuff. But after this 1066, we follow pretty much a linear line with respect to different rulers and how they came into play. And in around the 1200s, 1300s, what happened was we started getting class differentiation. So we had rich and poor. We had lords and ladies and peasants, right? More so than we had perhaps back in 1066. So these people started to become a little bit more powerful and feeling a little bit more privileged. And as a result of that, they started to get pissed off about the fact that the courts were open to all. They kind of felt, lords should sue lords, and peasants should sue peasants, but peasants shouldn't sue lords. Right? You understand the mentality? Okay. So they asked the king to close the courts so that the peasants couldn't sue the lords. Should the king do that?
No.
Why not?
You could create chaos.
Because if you remove a place to settle the disputes, we're going to have chaos, and they can't rule chaos. But they were very powerful, and they put a lot of pressure on the king. The king didn't want to do what they were asking. So what happened was, they issued this kind of a compromise. And what the king said is, look, I'm not going to completely block these people, but I'll give you this. And what he wrote, don't write this down, you'll never need it, okay? Is that king at that time said, no new writs. You don't need to know what a writ is for this course. Okay? Because it's not something that is used in Manitoba anymore. They're still used in Ontario, but I don't teach Ontario law. But I'm going to tell you so you understand the story, that a writ is basically the piece of paper that allows you to start a court process. So if you and I have a dispute and you go to the court, they will give you a piece of paper saying you get to come to court on this day, right? That piece of paper was called a writ. It was the ticket to get in, okay? That's basically what it was. So what this meant was, anything that had been dealt with by the courts up until this date could still be dealt with by the courts. So if people had stolen the horse, well, we can deal with horse theft. Then if people had killed somebody, we can deal with killing somebody. If they stole a loaf of bread, we can deal with that. And if we deal with a property line dispute, we can deal with that. But if there was anything new, it couldn't come to court. No way in. And this wasn't a problem initially because most things that people fought about had been fought about before, right? And it's been 150, 200 years. That's a long time, really. And a lot of people fighting about the same thing. And people have been fighting about the same thing for thousands and thousands of years, right? It's always a fight about this and that and the other thing. But so what they did is they said no new writs, which wasn't a problem initially. But the problem is, over time, society changed. And the law couldn't. Okay? They couldn't, because you couldn't take the new things in. And where this became a problem, real big problem, was when England started to fight the Holy Wars, which were called the Crusades. And the Crusades were not like the Battle of Hastings that were one day long. Men would leave their families for 10, 15 years. They'd be off in foreign countries, living the life of a soldier and fighting the Crusades. Okay? So, if you found out tonight, that you've got to leave tomorrow morning, what issue would you have to deal with? You got to go. You got to get on a plane, you got to go, and you're going to be gone for a month. Or a year. What would you have to deal with, folks, if this were you? All your financial stuff. What else? Your belongings, your property, your dog, right? Lots of stuff you got to deal with. So, if you're going away to fight in the Crusades and you've got your stuff, what's your stuff? Well, you got your horse, and you got your cow, and you got your little earthen hut, right? And you have your wife. You don't want to leave all that stuff, because if you just leave it, when you come back, all your stuff's going to be gone. So what would you do, folks? What would you do with your stuff? You're not going to sell it. What are you going to do? You're going to let someone else take care of your stuff while you're gone.
Where do you go for it?
You're going to let someone else take care of it. So what would happen is they would come, hey, I'm off to the Crusades, Bill. Listen, I'm going to be gone for about 5 to 15 years. Betsy's over there in the hut, and we got some brand new cocoa and hot chocolate in there, and why don't you go over there and take care of my stuff? Oh, Betsy, okay. And off he goes. And then the guy would go and fight in the war and come back 10 years later, and he'd want his stuff back. He would really, really want his stuff back. He's been in the war for 10 years and he wants some stuff. All of his stuff that he can get. And meanwhile, goes over and he goes, oh, Bill, I'm back. Thanks a lot, see you later. Me and the missus, we've gotten kind of cozy for the last 10 years. I don't think I want to give the stuff back. Well, it's mine. Well, I know that, Bill, but you did leave me, and this is what's happened, and, we got little Ralphie running around there now. So, the guy wants his stuff back, he goes to court. The court says, did he steal it?
Yep.
Why is he there at all? Well, you told him. And now he won't give it back. But he didn't steal it, did he? So they said, this is not theft. We've dealt with theft. This is what is called a trust, and a trust is new. And therefore, you can't get your stuff back, because we're going to close the doors of the court for you. And word spread. All of a sudden, these guys coming back from the Crusades, and the people that were left with the stuff found out, we don't have to give it back. And when people tried to sue, the courts were closed because it was a new thing called a trust. But there were thousands of these men came back, and they were mighty pissed off. So, they could not get any satisfaction, excuse my words, from the king. So they had to go somewhere else. So the most powerful person in England would be the king. Would you agree with that? Who's the second most powerful person in England? Don't say the Queen. She's property.
The church.
It would be. It'd be the head of the church. So these people went to see the church, who would probably be the Archbishop of Canterbury, and said, we're pissed. We're unhappy. We are part of your congregation. We've supported you and everything else. Do something. And the church said, okay, we will. We're going to make our own courts. And they did. So what happened in England around this time is there was the King's Court that would deal with the disputes that had been dealt with before. But there was also this thing called the Church Court, properly known as the Court of Equity. And you could go there instead, and they could make rules. Can you have two different courts making rules? No. Because you can't have one of them saying, drive on the right-hand side of the road, and the other one saying, no, drive on the left-hand side of the road. Because you don't know what the rule is now. So this actually went for several hundred years, where there were these two systems of court. And eventually, about 1700, they realized that they had to combine them, because you can't have two sets of rules. And it got very, very complicated. If this happens, you can go here and things like that. But the problem was there were two sets of rules. So they had to actually combine those rules into one. I'm going to explain how these rules work after the break. We're going to combine these rules into one. But there was conflict. One court system had said the answer is A, the other one said the answer is B. So they had to say, what do we do when we've got different answers? Who wins? Who wins, folks? King's Court, Church Court? It was Church Court. Why?
Because they dealt with it much recently.
No.
Popularity?
No.
More people support them.
No.
Because people feared God.
What?
Because people feared God.
That's a better answer. Because they represent God. And the king's high, but God's higher. So, right? So because of that, they said, you cannot go against our representation of God. And therefore, if God has said this is the answer, we don't go with what the king said, or the king's court said. So these were actually combined in about 1700s, and they formed one set of rules. These rules are still true today, and I'm going to explain to you how that works after the break, which I'd like to be almost precisely 10 minutes long, which would put us till what? It's 27 minutes to? 28 minutes to? Okay, go. You can have a break.
讲的蛮好，就是很启发人的那种讲法，不是那种填鸭式的。
那个他说的不就是那个征服者威廉的故事吗？哇，好听！听说书呢，我特别喜欢，我对英国历史特别感兴趣。
是吗？我这完全不懂，但是我觉得他讲的蛮好。
不太懂英国历史，当时学世界史没有学这么深入。是文科生吗？
我学了，但是我根本啥都没记住。上厕所去，走吧。
Yeah, I do actually. Is he a survey manager? So what, you guys are celebrating with the Did you get all the stuff for the chip? Oh, yours is right. Yeah, all the superstore apps, the ones that had all the ingredients. I'm sure you did. Hey, you're wired.
学霸学姐加你了吗？加了。 为什么我申请要加他不理我呢？
那你再申请一下。
我申请2回他都不理我，为什么？